Hey, my friend. Tonight we're diving into a gritty, smoky tale of medieval blacksmiths, the mystical art of alchemy, the hidden underground cities of Cappadocia, and the ancient whispers of dreams that shaped empires. Picture yourself by a roaring forge, sparks dancing like fireflies, or wandering through secret tunnels carved deep beneath the earth. This isn't the Hollywood version of history with gallant knights or magical potions. It's raw, sweaty, and sometimes downright brutal. You won't survive the night, trust me, because these stories will keep you wide awake with wonder. Before we start, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is. I love hearing from you all across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soothing hum, and let's step into a world where fire forges steel, secrets hide in stone, and dreams speak the language of gods. Ready? Let's unravel the past together, one spark, one tunnel, one dream at a time. You're standing inside the family forge, where the air is so thick you could slice it and forge it into a dull knife. Smoke wraps around you like a damp, musty cloak, one you never asked to wear. There's no crown here, no silver or lullabies, only the screaming of iron, the faint scent of burnt flesh, often your own, and a father with hands like mountain stone and a face like a walking lump of coal. You weren't born into silk. You were born into ash, into the clang of hammers on metal and the groans of burning wood. Your cradle was probably a dented nail bucket. Your first toy? A rusty clamp heavier than your entire arm. And the first lesson you ever learned wasn't counting from 1 to 10. It was knowing the difference between cold iron and the kind that would erase your fingerprints forever. From the moment you were tall enough to peek over the edge of the forge, your father pressed you into work, as if you were just an extension of himself, a walking bellows that nodded and wasn't allowed to speak. No one asked if you wanted this trade. Around here, if you could walk without falling into the coal pit, you were old enough to labor. If you could stay silent while burning, you were considered high quality. Your father wasn't a source of inspiration. He was an audio system with 3 modes: growling, yelling, and hit it harder, which, honestly, could have replaced the village fire alarm. He didn't explain. He pointed. He threw tools in your direction, and he expected you to understand, either by miracle or by fear. You learned how to keep the fire alive before you learned how to tie a shoelace. Not that your shoes had laces, they were just 2 burnt pieces of leather held together by hope. You learned to grip tongs with bare hands, learned to dodge flying sparks like a blindfolded dancer in a heavy metal concert. While kids from the next village chased chickens, you were chasing runaway iron pieces off the anvil, hot as the devil and heavy like a medieval debt. Your body didn't grow the usual way. It was reforged, bit by bit. Your arms didn't build muscle like a young knight, but like a 10-year-old boy carrying a 20-pound hammer. Your legs curved like horseshoes from standing for hours on scorched ground. Your eyes were bloodshot, not from sadness, but from smoke and sleep deprivation. You can't remember the last time you had a break. Maybe it was the time you passed out from dehydration and your father called it a lunch nap off shift. Around here, rest is a luxury. ranked alongside fresh meat and customers who actually say thank you. The forge never sleeps, and if it doesn't sleep, neither do you. But the worst part isn't the heat. The worst part is the rhythm of work that never ends. Pull, strike, twist, heat, swing, repeat. It repeats so much that you start to hear the hammer even in your sleep. And when you don't hear it, you jolt awake, terrified, as if the world has skipped a beat without warning. Slowly, you stop thinking of yourself as a boy. You're just a machine now. Another tool, like the anvil, heavy, unfeeling, and no one asks how it feels. You don't play. You don't dream. Every dream was melted down with the first warped piece of iron you ever made. And your father looked at you like you had just dishonored 3 generations of blacksmiths. And still, you're there. Hands stained with soot, heart bound by duty, eyes coated in ash, standing inside the forge like it's the belly of some ancient beast, hot, dark, and always hungry. You think this is the beginning, but really, it's just the welcome. Your childhood didn't float on dream-made balloons or smile-laced kites. It was forged from ash. It breathed smoke, and it walked on calloused feet, dragging themselves across ground as hot as a forge's tongue. While other kids ran barefoot through the grass, you ran. After a water bucket, heavy as a tax evader's conscience, just to pour it down the chute and return, only to be scolded for not pouring enough. Your toys were the kinds of objects others only touched with gloves, whispering protection spells for safety. A long iron clamp, hot as repressed fury, always chose the worst possible moment to slip from your hand. The one time you dropped it, the sound it made echoed like a funeral bell for half a day's peace. Your father said nothing. He just stared. And you swore that within that stare was a 3-hour sermon condensed into one cold shiver. Your playground? It was the plot of land left of the forge, where the ground cracked from heat, and your straw shoes, if still intact, would be cooked from the soles up in just 3 minutes of standing still. One time, you sat down to rest, and immediately shot back up after realizing you'd just roasted your rear like millet on a pan. After that, you never sat to rest again. Breaks? Here, a break meant you hadn't messed something up. Yet. You were your father's apprentice, a term that today would be called underage labor with incredibly bad luck. Each day was a lesson, with no blackboard, no homework, only mumbled orders, searing glares, and the ringing hammer blows that sounded like warnings from the gods. You didn't get paid, but you were compensated with the opportunity to survive until dinner. And honestly, that wasn't such a bad deal, considering there was that one time you nearly took a horseshoe to the face, all because you angled the anvil wrong. Luckily, it just grazed your ear, leaving a light cut and a heavy lesson. Whenever you made a mistake, there was no need for shouting, just the screech of snapping metal, and your father's hand swinging up like lightning. Not to hit you, don't worry, but to fling that horseshoe like he was playing Ring of Death, and you were the moving target. While the other children were out in the fields, drawing with sticks and laughing like they'd never heard of responsibility, you were inside, trying to keep your fingers from becoming fire's next meal. Once, you looked out the window, or rather, the smoke-choked gap pretending to be a window, and saw them chasing each other, smeared in sheep-dung, mouths wide open in laughter. And you, drenched in sweat and soot, felt jealous. Jealous of the stench rising from the pens, because at least it didn't burn skin. You learned not to groan when iron bit your hand, not because you were brave, but because groaning was a waste of time. Groaning meant stopping the hammer. Groaning meant your father turning around and asking, "Still got breath to whine?" And you understood then. If you had enough strength to complain, you had enough to keep swinging. Your hands hardened before your voice ever did. Your back bent before you even knew how to bend a letter. You didn't grow up on milk, but on hot air, cold meals, and the roars of a man who forgot how to say, "I'm proud," without feeling weak. Other kids had lessons. You had experience. They learned math. You learned to count the number of strikes it took to straighten a warped hoe blade. They learned art. You learned to tell the difference between red-hot iron and orange-hot iron, because one is ready to be forged, and the other is ready to roast your skin. One day, a kid had the nerve to call you dirty boy. He had curly hair, a white shirt, and the scent of soap. You? You smelled like sweat, smoke, and something resembling resignation. You didn't answer, not because you were polite, but because you were too tired to care. You didn't play. You didn't dream. Dreams here were a luxury item, only allowed if you ever had free time, which of course never happened. And if you did dream, it would only be of a day without burns, a meal with leafy greens, or a pair of sandals that didn't melt at the sole. And you understood, without needing anyone to say it aloud, that this was your fate. There was no choice. No, go to school to change your life. Just one life. One life with no games, no summers, no childhood. A life wrapped tightly in the name Son of the Blacksmith, and a forge fire that never dies. The forge is not just a place. It's a creature. Its heartbeat is the hammer. Its breath, fire. Its groan, the scream of metal against glowing coal. It doesn't sleep. It doesn't pity. And it absolutely does not forgive carelessness. You don't work in the forge. You belong to it. Like a single cell in this massive body, you don't exist outside of it, and it doesn't function without you. The hammer is your heartbeat. The hiss of hot steel in cold water, that's your exhale. You don't need to look to know when the forge is hot enough. The smell of ash, the sting on your skin, the throb in your temple, they all tell you. Outsiders call that instinct. You call it, if you get burned enough times, you learn fast. Your clothes need no dye. The forge does it for you. A distinct shade of sooty gray, a scent that's part burnt fat, part roasted leather, and part quiet resignation. Every crease tells a story. Every scorch is a lesson. You have a leather apron, once called protective gear, now just a fabric of pain, catching stray sparks and every misjudged swing. It used to be soft as butter. Now it's as stiff as the heel of someone who's walked barefoot over coals for a decade. The forge doesn't just bend your back metaphorically. It reshapes you into a being with uneven shoulders, a spine curved like a coat hook for fate, and hands so thick you could grab a hot pan without blinking. Not because it doesn't hurt, but because pain has become background noise, a soft lullaby of slow destruction. Every sense you have belongs to the forge. Your eyes are red, not from crying, but from ash. Your ears ring, not from noise, but from repetition so relentless, silence itself becomes terrifying. Once, the forge died mid-shift, wet coal. No hammering, no hissing, no fire. You stood there, frozen, cold sweat crawling down your spine. The world had grown too quiet, as if death was crouched behind a pile of damp embers. When the forge is silent, you can hear your bones move. And that is the most frightening sound of all. You're used to everything having noise. The squeal of clamps, the clang of hammers, the shriek of steel. That's the orchestra of hell, and you're its unwilling conductor. Each day is a symphony of blood and smoke, and you belong in it, like a guitar string, stretched until it's about to snap. Outsiders look in and think you're just working. They don't realize you are part of the anvil, part of the hammer, part of the fire that never dies. You don't clock out. You just change posture, from standing to work, to standing and waiting for the next blow. There are nights when you go home, if you can call that cold corner behind the forge a home, and the hammer still rings in your head. Not an illusion. It's muscle memory. Your fingers twitch unconsciously, reaching for tongs that aren't there. Sometimes you mumble in your sleep, not names of loved ones, but types of alloys. When the cold sets in, you don't shiver from the chill. You shiver because you're afraid the bellows will crack. When it's hot, you don't sweat from the sun. You sweat because the forge demands more wood. There is no weather in a forge, only working conditions, always set to not meant for regular humans. Sometimes, you glance at your hands and realize you no longer have 5 fingers like everyone else. Still 5 in number. But the nails are chipped, the skin is cracked, and your fingerprints probably vanished during that winter. You branded yourself on a blade that was too cold. You once had palms. Now you have 2 slabs of scarred hide, rough enough to sharpen knives. And strangely, you've gotten used to it. You no longer feel pain. Or maybe you've traded the ability to feel pain for something else, a terrifying kind of numbness. The forge teaches you how to live without expectation. You don't wait for praise. You don't hope for rewards. All you have is today, 1 hammer, and a to-do list longer than your shadow at sunset. And when you finish, you wipe your face, spit out the ash, and start again. Not for glory, but because, if you don't do it, who will? You've become the forge. You don't remember the last time you laughed, but you remember the first time you forged an axe blade that didn't warp. And somehow, that was enough to keep going. Because in a world that doesn't say thank you, where horses are groomed but blacksmiths are forgotten, the feeling of completing something useful is the closest thing to love you've ever known. Look at your hands. They're no longer the hands of a child, no trace left of the soft fingers that once clung to your mother's hand. if you even remember what that felt like. Now, they're two dark, cracked, rough slabs of flesh, like half-burnt bark from a dying tree. Every knuckle is a tiny map of mistakes, knife slips, iron bites, metal rods sliding from the tongs and leaving reminders longer than your memory. Calluses cover the skin so thick you once picked up a fallen iron rod from the forge with your bare hands, only realizing later when the scent of cooked meat lingered in the air. Pain is no longer a warning. It's background noise, like the wind outside or the caw of crows at dusk, always there, only noticeable when it goes silent. Your fingernails? Half of them are black, the other half missing. Some broke off and fell, others burned, peeling away like the skin of dried onions. You once thought they'd grow back. Now, you just hope they don't grow crooked. But even misshapen, torn, and far from presentable, hands that would make anyone recoil mid-handshake, these hands still work. You've smashed your fingers so badly you couldn't move them. So, you switched hands. Left hand throbbing? Grab the hammer with your right. Right hand shaking? Grit your teeth, switch back to the left. You don't get days off for pain. Fire doesn't understand relief. Iron doesn't wait for feelings. And your father? Even less so. He wants results, not reasons. A week without injury? It's never happened. Each week brings a fresh collection. Cuts, burns, bruises. You don't flinch when blood leaks from your wrist anymore. You just glance down, wipe it on your apron, and carry on, as if blood were just red sweat. A part of you thinks, if you're not getting hurt, maybe you're not working hard enough. But you don't hate your hands. On the contrary, you respect them. They are tools, companions, proof that you still exist within this fire. Strong, rough, resilient enough to bend heated iron with raw arm pressure. Once, you snapped a thick branch in half like it was stale bread. A child saw you and looked at you like you were some kind of monster. You smiled. Not out of pride, but because you didn't know what else to do. These hands keep the forge alive. They spark the flames at dawn, grip the hammer before the sun fully wakes, and pound steel until sunset no longer has the strength to color the sky. They've held every horseshoe, every sword, every door hinge in this village. No one knows your name, but everyone knows your work. And that work, it lives here, in these stone-calloused fingers. You've heard people speak of an artisan's hands. They picture something delicate, supple, fingers that pluck strings like they're dancing. Not your hands. Your hands are survival tools, forged for smashing, breaking, enduring. No one writes poems about them. But without them, this village would have fallen silent last winter. Each time you reach out to catch a glowing red rod of iron, you feel like you're holding on to something alive. Not steel, but purpose. And strangely, that gives you a reason. Some call it honor. You don't name it, you just do it. And if one day your hands can no longer lift the hammer, you know what comes next. Not rest, not retirement, but replacement, quietly, like a rusted nail pulled from a doorframe. No ceremony, no gravestone. You'll disappear like bloodstains on an apron, washed out, but still there, if someone looks closely. But until that day comes, you will go on with hands that have been scorched by life, bent over the anvil, and branded by countless near losses. You don't know if there's a place for you anywhere else. You don't know if life out there is softer. All you know is this: as long as your hands can hold a hammer, you are still a part of this fire. And in this world, where thank yous are as rare as pure iron, where your reward is a distracted glance and half a crust of bread, these hands, burnt, twisted, aching, are the only pride you dare claim. They're not pretty, they're not clean, but they are real. And in this world, real is enough. You inhale smoke every day, as if it were a vital seasoning needed to survive. Not because you enjoy it, but because you don't have a choice. In this forge, clean air is a luxury, like a day off, fresh meat, or a simple thank you. Each morning, you step into that suffocating room where light can't pierce the smoke, and the scent of burning coal mixed with hot metal forms a kind of occupational perfume that clings deep into your skin, your hair, and every fold of your clothing, like an ancient curse. You can't see more than a few meters ahead, not because your eyes are bad, though they squint constantly from the dust, but because the entire space is swallowed in man-made fog. Smoke clings to everything: your hands, your hair, even your thoughts. It winds its way into your lungs like patient thieves, never in a rush, but always stealing the most precious thing you have: your breath. The forge has only one vent hole in the ceiling, just enough for hope, not enough for escape. Wind rarely blows in, but every time it blows out, it carries a cloud of red dust that makes you cough until your face turns purple. No windows, no ventilation, only you, the fire, and an atmosphere so thick you could slice it with a knife and grill it over the coals for fun. You once tried tying a rag around your face, thinking it might fight back against the thing killing you slowly, but it only made things worse. Sweat pooled under the fabric, the stench became worse than the smoke, and it felt like being strangled by your own will to survive. You tore it off after a day, coughing harder than before. And then you learned: living in smoke hurts less than trying to fight it. Your throat is dry as charred wood. Every time you speak, you hear your own voice creak out, like a rope dragged through a rotten pulley. Hoarse, raspy, a blend between a whisper and the growl of someone about to lose their voice. No one talks much in the forge, not because there's nothing to say, but because no one wants to cough up blood in the middle of a sentence. Dry coughing becomes the background rhythm of your life. Each hammer strike comes with a jolt in your chest. Each time you bend down, a burning sensation rises from your lungs. You once thought you were sick, but then you saw your father cough the same way. And he's still alive, at least for now. So, you accepted it. Like a sailor accepts the taste of salt, you accept smoke as part of your skin. You know the consequences. Every breath is a step closer to the grave. Black lungs, asthma, maybe an early ending. But the forge doesn't care. It won't stop burning because you're getting weaker. The fire has no heart. It only has hunger, and you're the one feeding it coal, so you keep going. The hammer still strikes. Your hands still shake, but you still stand. Not because you're brave, but because there's no one else to do it. If you stop, who will forge horseshoes for old Mr. Merton's mare? Who will fix the door latch so the widow doesn't get blown away by the night wind? You could complain, but it seems the smoke has taken that from you too. Now, you breathe with the sound of cracking wood and live like a coal that hasn't burned out yet. One time, you heard your own coughing echo inside the forge. It rang like an old drum, hollow, sad, and hopeless. Your father glanced at you, then looked away, as if that cough were a familiar signal, nothing to worry about. But you know, he heard that same cough from your grandfather, and your grandfather from your great-grandfather, and then they disappeared. No one said much. Just one day, the smoke no longer needed another person. You dream strange dreams. In them, you breathe, not gasping, not choking in fits, but a single, long breath of clean, fresh air. And in that dream, you cry, not from emotion, but because you've forgotten what that feels like. Then you wake, and the smoke is still there, still filling the room, still slipping into your mouth when you yawn. And once again, you stand. You grip the hammer. You bring it down, beat after beat, like the heart of forged iron, never missing a beat, until you stop hearing the cough. Not because it's gone, but because you've grown so used to it, like you've grown used to breathing. It's not a way to live, but it's a way to survive. And for a blacksmith, survival is enough. Your tools don't rest neatly in a gleaming toolbox, nor do they hang in orderly rows like a Renaissance craftsman's display. No. They lie scattered like a battlefield after the clash, burnt, scratched, coated in ash and history. Each item has its own personality, like grumpy friends you can't live without, and traitors you still have to cling to every single day. The hammer, big, heavy, chipped along the edge, is your third arm. And if it really were an arm, it'd be one that never rests, always demands more, and isn't afraid to strike back if you grip it wrong. You gave it a name once, maybe hunch, maybe backache. Maybe you've forgotten its name entirely, and now only call it by the groan it forces from you each time you lift it. You scold it whenever your shoulder pops. You curse it each night when you can't sleep on your side because your back has hardened like an anvil. But still, you hold it every day, like holding your soul by the handle. Without it, you are no one. Not in the poetic sense, in the most literal way possible. Without it, you can't earn a living, can't get paid in radishes, can't have that thin, salty soup in the afternoon. You are a man, but the hammer is your ID. The tongs are different. They aren't heavy, but they're far from gentle. They sit quietly in a corner, waiting for you to pick them up, only to betray you at the worst possible moment. You clamp down on a rod glowing like fire, turn carefully, and it slips, as if it's playing a joke on you, as if it has a tiny soul, just to smirk every time you shout in pain from a burn. You've learned how to hold it with 3 fingers, tilt your wrist slightly, Avoid putting pressure on the spring. You've learned, and it still injures you. It's the lazy teammate in the smithing crew always saying, "I've got this," then letting go. But you still use it because there's no alternative. The world doesn't offer better tongs, just a few old ones, and you pick the least awful. That's also how you choose hope every morning. The chisel, once the sword among your tools, is now merely a suggestion of function. It's so dull, you're never quite sure if you're scraping iron or sanding rust. But you still keep it because it's still usable, meaning not entirely useless. It's slightly bent, the edge slightly crooked, the handle slightly cracked. But you love the familiar feel of its wooden grip, worn smooth with years. It's like a crippled limb you'd never dare abandon. The leather apron, the only armor between you and all the day's accidents, was once a sleek, tanned brown. Now, it's a scorched, torn canvas, stained with black ash and patches of dried blood. Every burn mark is a battle scar. Every hole is a time you almost didn't make it. But each morning, you still put it on like a silent ritual. Well then, let's begin again. You care for these tools like family, not because someone taught you to, but because if you don't, no one else will. You sharpen the hammer, oil the tong's hinges, wrap twine around the chisel's cracked handle. You line them up each evening, just like your father used to, not for beauty, but to remind yourself that you still have control over something. If one tool breaks, you're finished. There's no call maintenance, no order a new one. One time, you asked the blacksmith from the next village to lend you his hammer after yours split at the handle. He didn't say no, he just laughed. That's how this world works. You don't like them. They've taken your fingertips, your peaceful nights, every intact nerve you once had. Your shoulder aches because of the hammer. Your hands blister because of the tongs. Your eyes sting because the apron traps the smoke and blocks the breeze. But you also can't completely hate them. You are a blacksmith. But not just that. To the whole village, you're the hero in an apron, wielding tongs instead of a sword, a hammer instead of a crown. There are no cheering crowds, no drums announcing your arrival, just the creak of the forge door and the echo of your hammer, like the reply of a god too tired to speak. A knight needs a sword. You forge a blade as sharp as their ideals, even though you know most of them are swung for show, rarely cutting anything. A farmer breaks his plow. You repair it, often at midnight when the village sleeps, and you're still hammering nails under the flicker of an oil lamp and the last breath of coal. The church bell hangs crooked. You climb the tower, wind slapping your face, smoke still clinging to your hands, to restore the balance of something you've never had time to believe in. Villagers come to you like bees to a hive, noisy, clinging, bringing with them the dust of fields, stables, and their lives. They knock, if they knock at all, or barge in with muddy boots and a request hanging somewhere between urgent and entitled. And they say the phrase you hate most in this world. I know you're busy, but. You've heard it so often, you could carve it into your hammer handle and still have space for a personal curse. Busy? Of course you're busy. But the forge has no lock, and you have no excuse to say no. Because if you say no, that plow doesn't break the earth. That door won't close, and a child will cry all night because the wind chime no longer rings. You're the one who fixes everything, even the things that were never meant to be yours. And when it's done, when the sword gleams, the door latch clicks into place, or the bell hangs straight again, they nod. Some say, "Thank you," as quiet as the breeze slipping under a door frame. Some say nothing, just turn away, as if your presence is expected, like air, like soil, like morning fog. No one knows how many hours you stayed up to finish on time. No one sees your hand bleeding from a faulty clamp. All they know is, it's done. Payment? If there is any, it's as unpredictable as the weather. Some days, it's a few copper coins, so old you suspect they once bought bread during the reign of the last king. Other days, it's half a stale loaf, as dry as your father's life philosophy. And sometimes, it's a promise. Next time, I'll pay in full. I swear. You filled an entire ledger with oaths never fulfilled. You call it the gospel of empty promises. You're not rich. No one forges swords to buy horses. You don't build stone houses, don't sip fine wine, don't idle in taverns. You have a forge, a wobbly wooden stool, and hands that can't feel the ends of your fingers anymore. But you know something they don't, or pretend not to. If you disappeared, this village would crumble piece by piece, like a wall with no mortar. Who would fix the postman's wheel? Who would sharpen the scythes for harvest? Who would rehinge the inn's kitchen door when it falls off for the 5th time? Not the knight, not the priest, and certainly not the one asking you to make another key because they lost their 3rd. You are the backbone. No one sings about the backbone, but when it breaks, the whole body collapses. There was a time you stood in the village market, not to buy anything, you had no money, but to deliver a special order, a new set of horseshoes for the stable master. People passed you by, like walking past an unnamed milestone. You heard them talk about grain prices, a cow about to give birth, a thief getting caught. No one said, "That's the man who made those horseshoes." But that night, when you returned home, you saw that horse run, sure-footed, steady, and you didn't need anyone to say anything. The sound of hooves was the thank you you never asked for. You don't want medals, you don't need titles, but sometimes, sitting alone in the soot and scorched metal, you wish someone would walk in, not to ask, but to simply ask if you're okay. And then you laugh, not because it's funny, but because it's so far-fetched, you've forgotten the word for it. You're a blacksmith, not a hero, not a lord, but no one else can keep the village running each day. You live in fire, but you are the reason everyone else lives in the light. No one sings your song, but if, one day, every hammer falls silent, and every door refuses to close, maybe, just maybe, someone will remember you. And perhaps that will be enough. War is your friend. It sounds like a twisted joke, but it's the truth. When knights argue, kings rage, or lords flare up in fury. The forge blazes like a miniature sun in the center of the village. The fire doesn't sleep. The hammer doesn't stop. Orders come flooding in. Apprentices shout through the smoke to be heard. And you feel your heart pounding in rhythm with metal striking anvil. Breastplates, long swords, round shields, arrows by the hundreds. People line up, not to place orders, but to beg for a spot on the list. You hammer, you count coins, you swallow cold porridge between breaths. Yes, you're tired, but it feels meaningful. Yes, it hurts, but you're full. And when you collapse into your bed of straw late at night, smoke still clinging to your clothes, your stomach no longer growls. That night, you sleep, truly sleep. You don't love war, you don't sing songs about swords and spears, but in that chaos, you find the one thing the forge craves most: demand. Demand is the forge's oxygen. Without it, every flame goes out. Then peace arrives, soft as mist, cold as stone. One day, no one knocks on your door. Then 2 days, a week. No more frantic hoofbeats. No more apprentices bursting in, breathless, with new orders. Only you, the forge gasping for breath, and a pile of tools looking at you as if to ask, "Are we finished?" No more swords, no more armor, only farmers with dull sickles and tired eyes, not from battle, but from cracked earth. "I only have 3 onions," they say, voice hesitant like beggars at a church step. You nod. At first out of neighborly duty, then because it's all you have left. You forge hinges, fix kettles, patch dented pots, make kebab skewers for the tavern. Small work, trivial work. Work. That doesn't pay the bills. Villagers expect miracles. Tools good as new, priced as if given away. You try to say, "I'll need a little more this time." It took extra effort. They look at you as if you just insulted their ancestors, as if you're a thief, standing in the village square, apron scorched, demanding to rob them with a hammer. You once mended a broken sword with a sleepless night. Now you fix a broken stall lock in 3 strained hours and get paid with 1 egg and the words, "Next time, be quicker." You don't say anything. You just wipe the sweat, bow your head, and keep going. Not because you've surrendered, but because you have nowhere else to go. A forge is not an inn. It doesn't close when there are no guests. It demands, even when no one does. Each morning, you light the fire, not because there's work, but out of habit. You stack coal, pump the bellows, watch the flame crackle like a dying animal. No one comes. You wipe the hammer, sharpen the tongs, oil the chisel's chipped edge. You rearrange the workbench for the 13th time that month. Not to keep it clean, but to keep yourself from decaying. You start missing the screams of war. Not the screams of people, not the blood. No, you're not mad. But the rhythm of command, the urgent blows, the rush that made sense. Peace, to you, is a hollow shell wrapped in velvet. Looks pretty, but you can't eat it. You don't dare tell anyone that you miss the chaos, not because you want blood, but because it was when you mattered. Peace makes you invisible. When no one needs swords, no one needs you. Some nights you dream of alarm horns, of knights returning to the village, armor torn, weapons broken, trembling hands handing you blades with the words, "Urgent, fix it now." You wake up, sweat on your brow, and then you realize you're smiling. A dry, brittle smile, because you know if that day comes, you'll come alive again. Not just survive, but live in the kind of way where each hammer strike is heard. You don't say it to anyone, because who admits that peace makes them feel meaningless? But you know. The forge knows. The flame knows. It burns lower each day, like a hungry soul no one remembers to call by name. And you go on, of course, because you're a blacksmith. That's what you do, even if it's only for a potato, a nod, or a half-hearted smile. You still fix latches, straighten door bolts, weld chair legs, as if every petty repair is a way to keep yourself from disappearing. And deep down, you know, if war breaks out tomorrow, you won't run. You'll stoke the fire, lift the hammer, sharpen the blades, not for honor, not for patriotism, but because, finally, someone will need you. The forge knows no such thing as weekends, quitting time, or annual leave. And you, its creation, ask for none of that either. Your day begins before the rooster's crow reaches the ears of those still curled beneath their blankets. You open your eyes while the sky is still deep violet, while dew hasn't yet lifted from the grass, while the world hasn't remembered you. But the fire remembers. The anvil remembers. The hammer, though silent, remembers. You rise from your bed, a sack of old straw, once soft, now more like a bag of nails. You step into familiar darkness, lighting the fire with trembling hands and damp wood. No lamp needed. Your eyes are used to this. The dark isn't as frightening as that knock at the door just before dawn. "Sorry, but my cartwheel just broke." Of course it did. They always break. On Saturdays, right when you're about to eat. At the moment, you've just taken off your apron and dared to think, just once, you might sit down without someone calling your name. You make nails in the morning. The first batch is barely shaped when someone arrives. "Just a few," they say. "For the fence out back, my dog keeps running off." You smile thinly, not because of the dog, but because you know just a few nails always turns into an hour, 2 hours, the whole day. And the customer always stands there, arms crossed, eyes glued to you like their gaze alone will make the work go faster. Every small job comes with the same promise. It won't take long. But in a forge, nothing won't take long. Iron doesn't rush. The anvil has no sense of urgency. You do everything by hand, every strike of the hammer, every angle adjusted, every breath measured. And just when you're trying to get it right, a voice rises behind you. "Is it done yet?" You want to say you just started. That steel doesn't heat faster under a stare, but you nod instead, as patient as the earth being plowed. Your mind doesn't rest. It mutters calculations even while your hands are shaping metal. Which order came first? Which one is overdue? Who hasn't paid? Who won't? Every hammer strike is a reminder. Don't forget who owes what. Don't forget the cracked chisel handle. Don't forget the coal is running low. Don't forget to remind the apprentice that those tongs only grip. Disappointment. Sunday, it's special. Special in that you work more quietly, not because you're free, but because you work in secret. You fix the barn door hinge, weld old chains, check the farmer's hoe blade, all in silence, hoping the priest doesn't catch you. Because what if he thinks you're doing earthly labor on the Lord's Day? You thought you'd get used to it. But getting used to something doesn't mean it gets easier. You've forged your body into this rhythm, like a piece of iron, heated and bent until it simply accepts its new shape. And then you repeat. Work, repair, grind, bend, weld, patch, polish, deliver, wash your face, fall asleep sitting, wake up, and do it again, day after day, month after month. There's no finish line, no job well done, only silence between tasks, and you stealing a breath between duties. You've thought about stopping, but then what? Go where? Who do you know that doesn't need a blacksmith? Your world isn't larger than this village, and this village, though it doesn't say it, needs you more than it knows. You're part of a larger mechanism, a gear that turns unnoticed until it squeaks, breaks, and everything falls apart. You won't be praised. There are no statues, no folk songs. But when the gate won't close, when the axe won't cut, when a horseshoe falls off, they remember you. You keep working, day after day, to the point you no longer know if you're living for the work, or if the work is the only reason you're still alive. You ask yourself, how long until my hands can't lift the hammer? Will I die beside the forge, or in some forgotten dream? But then the question fades, because you hear a knock. A flimsy wooden door rattles in the early morning. Another broken hinge. Another person who needs you. You wipe your hands on the apron, inhale a breath full of ash, and step out to open the door. You think, maybe tomorrow will be different, or maybe not. But right now, as your hand grips that familiar hammer handle, you know one thing. As long as the forge still breathes, so do you. You work like a horse, but eat like a bird. Not because you're not hungry, but because time always runs faster than your mouth can chew. A meal, to you, is an emergency task. No room for enjoyment. A loaf of bread hard as the stones used to build chicken coops. A bowl of soup cold and lifeless. And if Lady Luck smiles, a slice of salted meat so thin, light passes through it. You chew quickly, not because it tastes good, but because the iron is cooling and the customer is waiting. And because you know that might be the last bite you'll get all day. You don't have a dining table. You have a three-legged stool and a corner of the workbench just wide enough to balance your bowl without tipping it into the coal pile. One hand still holds the tongs, the other shields the soup from falling ash. You once tried eating outside for some air, but that time the wind blew away your spoon and your hope. You learned the hard way. In the forge, even breathing deeply is a luxury, let alone savoring. Sleep? Ah, sleep. What others call a reward after a long day is, to you, merely a truce with exhaustion. When the village snores, when the smoke clears and the fire fades, you lower yourself onto a bag of straw, uneven as a topographic map of back pain, and pull up a blanket the color of ash, steeped in the scent of 100 late nights. No pillow, just your coat, folded. And even when you close your eyes, you can still hear the draft whistling through the cracks, the hammer echoing in your mind and your own heartbeat, like the pounding of an anvil that never stops. Your back aches, not in waves, but as a constant background hum, like a faithful apprentice who never leaves. Sometimes you can't even tell if your muscles are twitching from fatigue or simply repeating the same hammer strikes they made all day. Even in dreams, your hands jerk with phantom blows. You don't wake up because the dream ends. You wake because your chest is heavy, your shoulders are sore, and someone is knocking. They always knock just as you've taken your first real breath of sleep. When your eyes haven't even shut fully, the voice comes. "Smith, my horse lost a shoe. Sorry to bother you, but my door won't shut anymore." You sigh, not because they disturbed you, but because you know no one else will help them. You rise, put on your shirt, strap on your apron, rake the coals, relight the fire, as if you never lay down at all, as if sleep were a mistake to be corrected. You live on naps as brief as blinks. Once, you passed out right at the workbench. An hour later, you woke up with a chisel mark across your cheek. You just wiped your sweat and kept going. Not because you're unbreakable, but because if you don't do it, no one will. And if you collapse completely, no one will even know. In your world, eating and sleeping are intermissions, not rewards. They're like the inhale between two hammer swings. Brief, necessary, but not enough to be called living. You've heard people speak of beautiful dreams. You don't have dreams. You have hazy flashes of hammers, iron, tongs, and flames flickering in the dark. Even in your sleep, you work. And you wake up feeling unfinished. You've begun to forget what it feels like to sleep fully. You don't know what deep rest looks like. What you know is waking before the sun, dozing while it's still glowing red. Each day connects to the next, like links of iron welded together with sweat, soot, and sheer will. And perhaps the most frightening part is, you're no longer angry about it. You don't resent the knock at midnight. You don't lash out when your fourth meal of the day gets interrupted. You don't protest when your back screams, your neck stiffens, and the smoke burns your eyes. Because this is the rhythm you've memorized. This is the only language your body still understands. And then, one night, as you shut the forge and drag your stool to rest against the straw as usual, hoofbeats echo through the silent village street. Unfamiliar, not from the village. The horses' hooves don't clatter. They land heavy, deliberate. You open the door. Moonlight spills across the ground. A stranger stands there, cloak dusted with the road, face half covered. He dismounts silently, doesn't speak. He unties a satchel from his hip and lays something on your bench, wrapped in scorched leather. The object is heavy, cold, and strange. Not iron, not bronze. But the forge, that living thing that knows metal, shivers slightly as it touches the anvil. The stranger finally speaks, voice deep as the midnight sky. I need this reforged, but no one in the three kingdoms dared to accept. I heard, you never turn down a job. You look at the object, then at your hands, then at the fire, still glowing faintly. A breeze sneaks through the doorway, lifting dust off the bench. You don't know if it's a sign or just dust. But you know this: there will be no sleep tonight. You pass the craft down to your son, just as your father did, and your grandfather before him. There's no grand ceremony, no rite of passage. Just one morning, when the boy is tall enough to see over the edge of the forge, you place a scorched pair of tongs into his hands and say, "Hold tight." From that moment on, the fire has chosen its next keeper. He's only 7, but his hands are already stained with smoke, his eyes smudged with soot. He's still small, but his shoulders are beginning to learn how to brace against the weight of a glowing world and the echo of hammers. You don't ask if he's ready. The forge doesn't wait for consent. It only asks, will you fall? If not, stand still and learn. You teach him to read the color of fire like an ancient language. When the orange leans into blue, he must add more coal. When the flame glows red hot, he knows it's time to grip the tongs. When the iron hisses, it's not out of anger. It's an invitation. Now, strike. You teach him to listen, to the rhythm of hammer blows, to the iron's reply, to the quiet crack of metal, the whisper of failure. There are no books, no pens or paper. Everything is in the rhythm, the breath, the growing calluses on his palms, gathered day by day. Sometimes, when he slumps beside the forge, sweat streaming down his forehead, you tell him stories. Not fairy tales, but stories of your grandfather, hammering through winters when snow fell into the flames and rose again like ghostly smoke. Stories of your father, who once forged a blade for a nobleman but was forgotten when the titles were read. You speak as your hands file nails, eyes still watching the fire. And then you hand him a dried apple or a few salted chestnuts, a meager reward in a world where rewards are rare. But you also know gentleness is rare in a forge. The fire shows no mercy. Metal offers no forgiveness. If your heart softens too much, you'll let the boy fall. And if he falls, no one will lift him. You teach him not to cry when burned, not because the pain isn't real, but because tears can't quench hot steel. You teach him patience, to wait for iron to cool, to wait for the hammer to find its mark, to wait for the day to end with just one sore shoulder instead of an aching back. The boy will grow with an aching spine, scarred hands, eyes harder than his age. But you know, that's the only way to survive. When you can no longer lift the hammer, when your hands shake too much to even hold the tongs, he'll take over. This isn't cruelty, it's survival. This is the forge, a world with no room for those who've never felt how fire bites. You watch him as he swings the hammer for the first time. It glances off, bending the nail's head. You don't scold. You place the nail back on the anvil, adjust the angle, and say, "Again." He nods. No complaint, no tears, And this time, the hammer lands. Not perfect, but enough to call it a beginning. He learns quickly, not because he's gifted, but because he has no other choice. Just like you. Just like every man in this bloodline. Men born into soot, not banners and parades. You let him stand nearby when customers arrive. Let him hear the complaints, the unreasonable requests, the dismissive nods at the end of a long day. You want him to see that hands do more than work. They hold a quiet pride. I made that. I kept this place from falling apart. And on a late afternoon, when the last sunlight slips through the roof's crack, you see him sitting alone, wiping down the hammer handle with a dry cloth. No one told him. No one forced him. He does it because he understands. Tools that aren't cared for will turn against their master. And in that moment, you nod silently, just like your father once did. You don't write a will. You don't leave behind wealth. But you pass on the fire. Not the literal flame, that can die, but the slow burning kind, the one that lives in the hands, in the eyes, in a will that doesn't bend, even when lungs tighten from smoke, even when arms tremble from weariness. You pass on a way of thinking, that a blacksmith is not just someone who pounds metal, but someone who stands firm when the whole village leans in. Someone who knows that honor isn't in the praise, but in finishing the work, even when no one sees. You leave the forge, not quite abandoning it, more like carrying it with you. The fire still smolders behind your eyes. The hammer still weighs on your shoulders. But now, you stand in another land. No snow, no mist. Only hot sand, blinding sunlight, and a river as vast as the artery of a civilization. The Nile. This is Egypt. Not the Egypt from textbooks, but the Egypt of sacred breath and the heartbeat of the ancient world. And here, you are no longer a blacksmith, at least not in the old sense. Here, people like you are called alchemists. But don't imagine black cloaks, glowing eyes, and vials of swirling smoke. Alchemy doesn't begin in shadowy basements filled with mercury and failed experiments. It begins with earth, black earth. The kind the Egyptians call chemia. The fertile soil lining both banks of the Nile, dark as ink, rich as a dream. Chemia isn't just for planting seeds. To them, it is the symbol of transformation. From sand to harvest. From death to life. From lead to gold. Not in a jar, but in the soul. You walk through the market. The herbalist grinds plants into powder, wrapping them in linen. The baker kneads dough with calloused hands much like yours once were, then bakes it over hot clay ovens. Each person, though they don't call themselves alchemists, is changing the nature of something, from raw material into survival. You're led to a temple. No one forces you in, but your feet know the way. Inside, there's no clanging of hammers, but soft music, quiet whispers. The air is thick with incense. On the walls, carvings, the moon, the ankh, the falcon, and a figure with the head of a baboon and a bird. Thoth, god of wisdom, of writing, of transformation. The Egyptians believe it was Thoth who gave humanity the secret of alchemy, not to grow rich, but to understand themselves. And then, the temple keeper, eyes deep like the darkness before dawn, leads you to a stone slab, not large, not majestic, but from its deep green surface something stirs, something older than metal. The emerald tablet. No one knows who wrote it, but every alchemist speaks of it. The inscriptions don't shine. They don't shout. They simply sit, silent, waiting for someone patient enough to listen. You touch the tablet. Cold, but not the cold of steel, the cold of knowledge not yet grasped. You read, "As above, so below." All things come from the One, through transformation. Separate the earth from the fire, gently and with great skill. It rises from earth to heaven, then descends again, gathering the light of both the high and the low. You don't understand it all, but you don't have to, because you feel it. The words are not just language. They're molten metal pouring into your mind. Each line strikes like a hammer on the sacred anvil of your soul, a soul once calloused by real hammers, now trembling from an invisible fire. You realize, alchemy isn't just turning lead into gold. Alchemy is turning a human into something greater. You once lived in a forge where everything was physical, concrete, horseshoes, hinges, axe heads. But here, Egypt teaches you that every form of forging begins within. Forge the heart, forge the mind, forge patience, not with iron, but with your own soul. And suddenly, you understand. The years of hammering didn't just shape objects, they shaped you, so that you would be strong enough to arrive here, and soft enough to receive. Inside you, the old fire burns alongside the new, one made of coal, one made of light. Both are necessary. Both will help you transform. You don't yet know what you'll do with this knowledge. You don't yet know what the gold in the emerald tablet truly is. Truth, or something you're not yet ready to understand. But you know one thing. You will not return to the forge the same, at least not with the same hands. You stand silently before the emerald tablet, hand resting gently on its cold green surface, and it feels as though you're touching something that doesn't belong to the physical world. The slab glistens with a mystical sheen, as if it were carved just yesterday, yet could have been resting there since before mankind knew how to carve. You read, "That which is above is like that which is below." It's not just a philosophical phrase. It's a two-way mirror, reflecting between cosmos and human, between planets and soul, between the dance of stars and the turbulence of thought. You once believed everything had to be tangible: fire, hammer, iron, sweat. But now you understand. The invisible world has its own structure, its own material, and it too must be forged. The tablet doesn't teach formulas. There's no take 3 parts sulfur, 2 parts salt, and boil it under moonlight. It offers no instructions. Instead, it invites you into a journey of inner transformation. You once thought the philosopher's stone was a magical rock that turned lead into gold. Now you know it's a metaphor. Gold is not a metal. It's wisdom, character, a refined soul. And lead is not just matter. It's ignorance, fear, and coarse desire. You glance at your palm, the hand of a blacksmith, calloused, cracked, more accustomed to holding a hammer than a book. And yet here it is, holding knowledge that has traveled for millennia, from the black soil of the Nile to the library of Alexandria, through Persia, Byzantium, and eventually Europe, where it will wear the frayed edges of Latin manuscripts. A voice echoes behind you, not loud, not urgent, simply present. A tall figure wearing the mask of Anubis approaches, holding a small earthen jar. Etched onto the jar, the symbol of Thoth, a reed pen and crescent moon. The figure places the jar in your hands and says, "Forge it, but this time, not with a hammer." You remove the lid. A thin, dark smoke drifts out, soft as breath. Inside, a strange black powder. No scent, no weight. But when you bring it close to your skin, you feel a vibration, as though it's waiting to be named. A substance without form, ready to become whatever you are capable of imagining. You return to the hearth, but this is no iron forge. There is no anvil, no hammer, only a stone bowl and a pale blue flame flickering like a whisper. You pour the powder into the bowl, murmuring lines from the tablet. Separate the earth from the fire, gently and with great skill. It will rise from earth to heaven, then descend again, to gather the light of both the upper and lower realms. You don't fully understand, but you proceed. By instinct, the same instinct that once told you how hot the iron had to be, the same one that knew how much fire your hands could bear. Now, you use that same instinct to guide transformation. The black powder begins to swirl slowly. No wind, no force, yet it turns, on its own, from black to gray, to red, to gold, then back to gray, as if it's hesitating, as if it's testing you. You place your hand on the rim of the bowl, not touching matter, but touching meaning. You think of yourself, the 10-year-old boy with his first burn, the man hammering without end, the father passing down the craft through soot and fire, the seeker searching for meaning in each repeated blow. You wonder, if I can forge iron into form, why not forge myself into something more? And in that moment, the powder glows gold. Not because you touched it, not because you recited the words just right, but because you understood. Alchemy is not magic. It is discipline, will, faith, and patience so absolute that the universe must answer. The substance solidifies into a small stone, golden with a bronze tint, strangely heavy. Not real gold, but you know, you've just crossed the first threshold. You haven't created the philosopher's stone. You've created the belief that it can be done. And that is the first step no one can take for you. You place the stone into a cloth pouch, tie it shut. The figure in the Anubis mask nods. The path begins. No applause, no crown, but within your heart a hammer strikes, not on an anvil, but in an invisible forge nestled deep within your soul. You leave Egypt with a small stone in your pocket, but a great door has just opened inside you. Your journey takes you to Persia, where the desert blazes bright, where fire isn't just used for warmth, but worshipped, like truth itself. Here, alchemy doesn't live in dark cellars. It lives in the Zoroastrian flame, sacred, eternal, guarded always within temples of white stone. That fire is not just heat. It's a symbol of purity, of transformation, of holding the world back from falling into the darkness of ignorance. You step barefoot into the fire temple. No one greets you. None is needed. The scent of resin and sacred ash surrounds you, thick and silent, like an ancient blanket. The flame burns without flicker. It's still, steady, even, as if the flame itself were meditating. Here, the teacher you seek is not a sorcerer or a king. It is Zosimos of Panopolis, no longer alive, but still present, through texts, through dreams, through the strange pull you cannot explain. Zosimos, the 3rd century alchemist who carried 2 souls, one Egyptian, one Greek. He left behind no formulas, only dreams. And in those dreams, alchemy was not a profession. It was a sacred rite, a ritual of burning the old self to be reborn anew. You open an ancient manuscript written in Greek, edges frayed, ink fading. Under the sacred flame's light, you read, "I dreamed I was cut into pieces by a blade, then burned, then turned to steam, then reformed as a new man. But not me. Someone else. Cleaner." You pause. Not because you don't understand, but because you understand too well. You've lived in the forge. You've watched metal heated, struck, stretched, bent, distorted, tempered, and made bright again. You thought you were forging iron, but in truth, the forge was forging you. Zosimos wrote of the soul burned to be reclaimed, of the lion devouring the snake, pure strength consuming base instinct, of a man turning to vapor, rising beyond form, then descending again, like a distillation not of wine, but of consciousness itself. You see yourself in every image, not because you dreamed the same dream, but because every night spent as a blacksmith was a Zosimos dream. You've been melted down by fire, by time, by solitude. You've curled up in pain, then stood again in silence. Zosimos didn't teach you how to make gold. He taught you how to remake yourself. The fire in the temple burns as evenly as the ancient breath of the cosmos. You sit there, one hand holding the manuscript, the other pressed to your chest, feeling your heartbeat, steady, weary, resilient like that flame. Alchemy, you realize, is not science, and it is not magic. Alchemy is an experiment repeated endlessly to uncover the truest part of yourself beneath the soot of habit, of selfishness, of pride, of all the "is it done yet" voices that chased you all your life. You think about the nights in the forge, about your son, his eyes full of smoke, but his hands already steady on the tongs. You think of the stone you created, not a thing, but a witness that you dared to change. You sense you're stepping onto the very path Zosimos spoke of, a path that doesn't require death of the body, but demands death of the old self, the part that only knew how to strike, not how to listen, the part that endured but never forgave, the part still afraid of change itself. You rise. The coals crunch beneath your feet like the cracking of an old shell. As you turn from the temple, someone places a small ceramic jar in your hand. Inside, a thin slip of paper, handwritten. You have endured the burning. Now, endure the dissolution. Find the nameless spring in the lands of the East. There, the soul is distilled. You see no one, only the flame, still burning, still silent, but speaking to you in a language you've spent your whole life learning, the language of patience, of endurance, of transformation. You tuck the paper into your robe, fingers still clutching the jar. There is no hammer now, but you know, the next trial does not lie in your hand, but in the flow. You stand in 8th century Baghdad, beneath moonlit domes, with the scent of damp parchment and fresh ink wafting from the book market across the alley. This is no longer the forge. This is a center of knowledge, where the language of the cosmos is translated into formulas, into brass instruments, into slender ancient vessels, curling upward like smoke, searching for heaven. You meet Jabir ibn Hayyan, known to many as the father of chemistry, but you quickly understand that title is only the surface. Behind those bright eyes and silver beard is a man who pulled alchemy from the wilderness of dreams and anchored it in observation, in measurement, in record-keeping. You enter his chamber, not large, but filled with strange tools, glass flasks with wooden stoppers, enameled ceramic crucibles, distillation tubes, and a faint acid vapor rising from a vessel he has just removed from the flame. Don't fear the smell, he smiles softly. This is the scent of transformation. Jabir doesn't strike with hammers, as you once did, but he knows heat, he knows flame color, he knows how matter shifts, no differently than you know which metal rings truest beneath the hammer. You watch him distill mercury, create nitric acid, and meticulously log each reaction in a fire-stained notebook. To him, each experiment is a question posed to the universe. And if the universe responds with crystals, with vapor, with changing color, then that is how it speaks. You are beginning to understand me. You ask, why do you work without pause? Jabir looks at you, and for the first time, his gaze isn't in the room. Because I believe gold is not something to be hoarded in chests, but the final expression of balance. The perfect metal is one that has survived all turmoil. He believes that all matter, from lead to gold, follows an inner journey. And if we learn to guide that process, we not only create gold, we glimpse the true nature of all things. You listen and remember your earliest hammer blows as a boy. No one told you back then that each bar of iron had a life of its own. But now, you know, everything can change, given enough fire, enough will, and enough understanding. Jabir doesn't just create acid. He creates a language of transformation, a language not for flattering kings or writing books, but for opening the door to a world where man is no longer a victim of fate, but the blacksmith of his own soul. His writings aren't like the Emerald Tablet, short, cryptic. Jabir's writings are structured, step by step, condition by condition, test by test. Alchemy, through him, escapes the labyrinth of symbols and becomes a detailed map. Each page, a fragment of that map. And you are learning to read it. From Baghdad, these texts will travel to Toledo, Cordoba, and later to Florence and Paris, inspiring medieval alchemists, men who chased the dream of turning iron into gold, but laid the foundation of modern chemistry in the process. And you realize, Jabir is not just a scientist. He is a bridge between two worlds, the world where fire burns hands, and the world where fire illuminates the mind, where gold is an element, and where gold is the symbol of a perfected self. You are no longer just a blacksmith. You are part of a system, a link in a chain of inheritance stretching from the black soil of the Nile, through Persia, into the laboratories of the Renaissance. And you understand, alchemy has not died. It has merely changed form, just like the metal reshaped in the forge. When you leave the laboratory, your hands hold no hammer, no philosopher's stone, but your back is heavier, because now you carry knowledge, not to hoard, but to transform. And as you turn to go, Jabir says only one thing. Fire can teach us something, but it is ash that reminds us all greatness will dissolve if no one carries it forward. You nod. Outside, Baghdad's sunlight pours over the golden rooftops, and in a shaded corner, you spot a boy tending a flame, his eyes focused, not unlike yours once were, when your hands still trembled, and the world was nothing more than a block of iron waiting to take shape. You leave Baghdad, the place where fire burns inside flasks, where thoughts are distilled like strong liquor, and you step into a land utterly different. There are no hammer strikes, no Egyptian incense, no faint Persian acid in the air. Instead, there is stone, a land of rock, solid, silent, as if even time itself has retreated to hide. You set foot in Cappadocia, a name that whispers like wind through stone crevices, short, sharp, but not easily understood. This land does not try to seduce you with color or promises. It simply hides. You see stone chimneys, natural spires rising from the earth like ancient scars. Beautiful? No. Intriguing? Very. The rock here isn't coarse. It's soft enough to carve, to hollow out, to pierce through over centuries. Soft enough to conceal. Soft enough to live within. They tell you, bow your head when entering. You think it's out of politeness. But no. The first low ceiling brushes your hair, then your forehead, then your pride, and you understand. This place is not meant for those who cannot bow. You enter an underground city, 18 levels deep, wrapped beneath the soil like a soul building its own tomb. You pass through corridors so narrow your shoulders brush the walls. The air is still, as if voices have never touched it. But as you descend each uneven step, you begin to see signs of life, not just shelter, a world arranged to survive without ever seeing the sky. You see homes, with stone shelves, lamp holders, a charred bread loaf black as coal. You see churches, low ceilings, but domes, sacred symbols, and spaces for kneeling. You see wells, not drawn from rivers, but from faith. Faith that someone would survive long enough to drink from them. You see air shafts stretching from the depths to the sky, like the breathing tubes of a life forced to lie still. Then you see them, the rolling stone doors, massive, round, silent. They do not look like doors. They look like tomb seals. But they are not. They are shields, pushed into place from within, not to keep rain out, but to block something worse than light. You place your hand on the cold stone and ask yourself, who built this? And why? To escape invasion? Perhaps. To avoid disaster? Reasonable. But deep inside, another voice speaks. Or, to hide from something that cannot be named? This place is not just a refuge. It is a choice for survival. When the world above becomes unlivable, humans do not vanish. They descend. And with bare hands, they turn rock into roads, caves into rooms, darkness into shelter. You stand on the 8th level, no longer sure whether it's day or night, unsure where you are in the world. But you know, you are in a place where people lived without ever seeing the sun, and you begin to wonder, could concealment itself be a form of alchemy? In life, people speak often of battle, of transformation, of epic quests toward something higher. But here, in these stone corridors, you understand. Sometimes, the only way to survive is to retreat, to vanish, to wait in silence, and bide your time. You look at a stone wall, no carvings, no dates. Yet it speaks more than 100 books. This is where life waits to be reborn. Not all metals need fire. Some need darkness. Not all souls rise. Some must go down, so they might return. You emerge from the final level after many hours, or perhaps many days, for in Cappadocia you lose all sense of time, but rediscover the meaning of life. Outside, the sky is still high, the wind still blows, the sun still scorches. But you are not the same. You are no longer the one who only knows how to forge. No longer the one who only seeks truth in the light. You are the one who has learned how to survive in stone. You lie on the cold stone floor of an Egyptian temple, your head resting on a thin linen cloth, your chest rising and falling with each faint wisp of sacred incense drifting from a bronze bowl. Around you, there is darkness. Not the darkness of fear, but a darkness prepared for listening. Outside, the sun has sunk beyond the Nile, but within the heart of the temple, dreams have only just begun to rise. The guide tells you, don't try to sleep. Be ready to dream. In ancient Egypt, dreams were not illusions. They were messages. The way the gods, especially Thoth, the god of wisdom and writing, whispered to mortals through voiceless images. You close your eyes. You dream of a snake slithering around your neck, not constricting, just breathing steadily. You dream of a flame burning without consuming anything, glimmering endlessly in the palm of your hand. You see the dead, wearing horned headdresses, standing in a circle around you, not threatening, only silent. And you see a man, a priest, holding a scroll covered in drawn symbols, murmuring chants, his eyes half closed, as if looking not into the dream, but into you. You wake at midnight, your body soaked in sweat, but not cold, your eyes stinging as if you just walked through a sandstorm. And the interpreter of dreams waits, beside a stone wall etched with the eye of Horus. The snake is untamed knowledge. The fire is unused potential for transformation. The dead are ancestors whose memory seeks your attention. And that dream is an invitation. Do not ignore it. You write everything down, not on paper, but through the feeling still trembling in your chest. Your journey continues, this time to the temple of Asclepius in Greece, where people sleep to be healed. Here, before lying down, you cleanse yourself, fast, and pray. Because a dream is a meeting, and the guest is divine. You sleep on a stone bed, surrounded by marble statues of snakes coiled around staffs. And when darkness blankets the peak of Olympus, you dream. A white hand lifts you from the ground. A serpent licks an old scar on your shoulder. A whisper, wordless, echoes through you. You don't hear it, but you understand. When you awaken, the pain of the old wound has not vanished, but you know it no longer controls you. The Greek healer looks at you and nods. Not everyone dreams of Asclepius. You were not healed, but you were given the power to heal yourself. You leave the temple at dawn, carrying a new kind of agency. Then, you travel to Mesopotamia, where clay tablets from 4,000 years ago recorded dreams as national treasures. Here, people dream, then come to the temple. Dreams here are forecasts, news bulletins from the world that has not yet happened. One person dreams of blood flooding the river. 3 days later, enemy forces invade. Another dreams of a shattered moon, and the crops die prematurely. A king dreams of his temple collapsing. He withdraws from his campaign, and because of that, survives. You listen, then write, not with your hands, but with memory, with reverence. Because here, dreaming is a public service, a way humanity sweeps the future clean through nighttime images. You begin to understand. Dreams are not shattered fragments of consciousness. They are the language of the universe, written in symbols, in sensations, in colors no one can describe. You once believed that metal needed fire to transform. Now, you know. Sometimes, the mind itself must melt within a dream in order to crystallize into something deeper, more precise, like silver settling into the shape of a bar. You sit, after many days of journeying, and write down something you've never said before. Every dream is a forge, but not for forging objects, for forging the self. We don't close our eyes to escape, but to see what waking eyes cannot. If iron needs fire, then the soul needs meaningful darkness. You return to the present, where clocks tick, where phones vibrate, where morning coffee steams. But the footprints you once left in the sands of Egypt, on the stones of Cappadocia, on the steps of Baghdad, have not faded. You open your eyes to the white light of a familiar room, yet your mind still sees the stone chimneys, the emerald tablet, the gaze of Jabir, the Zoroastrian flame, and the mirror that reflected nothing. The blacksmith, the first version of yourself, has not disappeared. He still lives on in every silent worker, the truck driver at 3 a.m., the janitor sweeping while others sleep, the road repairer, the mail carrier. They are not sung about. No statues are built in their name. But they keep the world turning, just like you once held the knight's sword, the hinge for a door, the wheel for a long journey. Alchemy? They say it's dead, replaced by chemistry, by formulas, by controlled reactions. But you know, the spirit of alchemy never left. It merely changed its name. It lives on in neuroscience, in psychotherapy, in philosophy, in the question, who am I? A question no machine has ever truly answered. People are still distilling, not metals, but meaning. People are still searching for gold, not in the soil, but in awareness. The underground city of Cappadocia, silent yet resilient, taught you this. Sometimes, hiding is not weakness, but a profound survival strategy. Not everyone needs the spotlight. There are those who live deep, and because of that, they endure. And dreams? Dreams were never false. You once dreamed of serpents, of fire, of a priest. You once slept in the temple of Asclepius, listened to the whisper of healing. You once saw the future etched into Mesopotamian clay. And now you understand. Dreams are the mirror of the soul. You realize something. History is not just a story. It is a mirror. And each time we look into it, if we are quiet enough, we see ourselves, not in form, but in journey. You sit still, switch off the light. The room dims. There are no more stone chimneys, no more forges, no more temples, only steady breathing and nameless memories. You close your eyes, but this time, not to hide. This time, to step into the final forge, the one inside yourself. There, a dream still waits to be forged. And if you're hearing this, whether it's midnight or early dawn, in your car, your room, or somewhere far away, thank you. Truly, thank you. For walking with me through Egypt, Persia, Greece, Cappadocia, and through the deepest levels of the soul. If this story touched something in you, share it with someone who's searching, not for answers, but perhaps for a new way of seeing. And if you wish to continue with me on other journeys, where history meets the soul, where the past speaks to the present. Subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. But for now, turn off the light. Close your eyes. Let the flame, the tunnel, and the dream take you to a place where light needs no name. Sleep well.